Israel's new plan is to shrink, not solve, the Palestinian conflict. Here's what that looks like. Goodman, a political philosopher, has rocketed to public prominence in Israel and beyond for his contrarian thesis on how not to solve the long-running conflict. Many have taken to calling him the court philosopher of Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, an ultra-nationalist former settlement leader, who has publicly embraced Goodman's paradigm of shrinking the conflict. But other centrist and leftist ministers have also come calling. Even the Biden administration has seemingly taken on what Goodman calls his pragmatic and less ideological approach. While the White House remains committed to a two-state solution, Secretary of State Antony Blinken said in May that the immediate priority was to rebuild some trust between Israelis and Palestinians. Goodman himself is bemused by all the newfound interest from politicians, diplomats, and generals. Earlier in his career, he wrote books analyzing ancient Jewish texts, which he says was exactly the right training for tackling an issue as contentious as the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Goodman deployed this approach in his 2017 book, Catch 67, The Left, the Right, and the Legacy of the Six-Day War, which wrestled with the internal Israeli debate about the conflict with the Palestinians and the fate of the territory Israel captured during the 1967 war.
I showed both sides' argument, just like in the Talmud. If Israel stays in the territories, it threatens its future as a Jewish and democratic state. If it leaves the territories, it threatens its future due to security concerns. The book, Goodman says, caught fire, becoming a surprise bestseller in Israel that was quickly translated into English. In recent weeks, Israel has begun adopting some of these measures, including issuing 15,000 new work permits inside Israel for Palestinians, floating the Palestinian Authority a $500 million loan, re-establishing joint economic committees to discuss future projects, allowing reunification for Palestinian spouses in the West Bank, and tentatively approving 2,000 new housing units for Palestinians in the part of the West Bank under full Israeli control. There is no consensus in the government about the end game, but they can agree about the game. This is this government's entire approach on all issues, Goodman says. The important thing is to agree on the action, not on the narrative surrounding it. Goodman's critics from both the right and the left aren't as sanguine. For the right, the steps Goodman is promoting likely run a higher security risk than he appreciates, and in any case miss the larger point. This conflict is not due to friction between Israelis and Palestinians. It was there before and it'll be there after, even if the left makes us leave, says Ran Baratz, a public diplomacy director for former Prime Minister Netanyahu. You think you're shrinking the conflict, but for the other side it's just a lull between wars where they're improving their position. According to Dalia Scheindlin, a political analyst at the Century Foundation think tank, Goodman's approach appears to perpetuate the paradigm of Israel giveth and Israel taketh away, and it's unclear if it's sincere regarding genuine Palestinian self-determination. The new Israeli government, she adds, latched onto a slogan, but I don't know what content behind the slogan they're actually going to implement and what their intention is behind it. Palestinians appear bemused by this wholly Israeli debate about what is fundamentally their future too. It's nice that Goodman is analysing what can bring 80% of Israelis to consensus about the conflict, but can this issue be resolved if only one side agrees? I doubt it, says Saima Sinawali, an activist and internal dissident from the ruling Palestinian Fatah party. I prefer if one Israeli and one Palestinian talked about what 80% of Israelis and Palestinians can agree on. Goodman, for his part, argues that increasing Palestinian self-governance is a good unto itself that will only improve Palestinian lives and increase Israel's options in future. After all, he says, the old approaches haven't delivered. We won't get to peace through big diplomatic pushes. It'll only be through small steps until the Palestinians achieve a critical mass of self-governance. At that point, the positions of many Israelis and Palestinians will likely change. Right now, our imagination is so limited.
Thank you for watching. Please subscribe.